Hello, everyone. D. Alfred Ostrowski. In this recording, I'm going to be giving a tutorial / demonstration of the compiling, publishing, and execution of your first module with Move programming on the Aptos network. As usual, I will be running through the Aptos developers documentation, working through the example of your first Move module, and I'll be implementing it on the Amazon EC2 instance, a T2 instance. And as usual, I'll be I'll be pulling in the commands that is documented on my GitHub that'll be associated with this video. So you can follow right along and run the commands, hopefully right along with the video, and be up and running on this platform. So let's get started. I already took the liberty of starting up the instance. So I am assuming that you have an Amazon account as usual and a means to access your Amazon instance. I usually use PuTTY to grab a quick client. You can use the command console that comes in Amazon or whatever means that you're interested in. But I started the instance already and I have it up and running. And if you need to figure out how to do that, or you haven't done that before, you can look at some of my early videos, but for brevity, I omitted that part. It's well documented in my prior videos, and it's pretty standard, as is the installation procedure for the Aptos framework that I will be matching exactly what I've done in some of the prior videos related to the Aptos blockchain. So if you have that already installed, you can step ahead a few minutes. I'll try to bookmark these as I move forward. But at this point, I'm still going to do the install just because this platform is continually changing. And when you're pulling off the cloud, not pulling off exact versions of all the software, let's say with Aptos Core. And there have been some subtle differences that I've noticed from the very first time that I ran, even running this example from a couple weeks ago to this current period of recording this video. So I have it all documented, and if I come up with better implementations or explanations, I will be including that in my documentation, try to backfill that or create new content. And as usual, I also have my references that I use to give some deeper explanation of these steps, and that is below the steps identified in the README install file on the base GitHub installation. So let me get started. I'm at home in Ubuntu as usual. I don't usually create a project directory for these examples because I'm not running a production instance. Obviously, this isn't exactly the way you might want to do it for production, but we just want to get up and running, learn more about Move programming on the Aptos network, and then take these examples, as I usually say, and take them wherever you want to go. Maybe this is not your preferred platform, and that's fine. But this has proven to me time and time again a good common means of translating solutions. Of course, you go through the tutorials and documentation or any type of resources on the web or otherwise, nothing works exactly to the letter as it is advertised. So that's the purpose of this, to smooth that out and also provide some explanation, but there's no purpose in explaining something that doesn't work. So let's get it up and running and get going. So I'm prepping for the install of Node.js, as I usually do. And I'm doing the node source install as usual. I did the sudo apt-get update as I've just been talking, and I did the sudo apt-get install, curling the GNUPG. And again, I'm not going to go deep in the weeds on the Unix. I have the resources here if you want to learn more about the node source installation. This is a little more lengthy install than you would have on Ubuntu, but this is giving us Node 20. One of the very newest versions of Node. And if I did some of the more easier one-step installs, I'm going to be getting an older version. And the problem with that is you get a bunch of deprecation messages, and it's really not good practice, especially if you want to keep moving forward in your development efforts. So a couple more extra steps here. And again, everything is documented on my GitHub, so you can just go to that, hopefully, even as you're watching this video, and in 20 minutes, and go from pretty much ground zero to have your first Move module up and running. I do have to say the developer's documentation is as good as it comes with the Aptos framework, and there isn't a lot of resources related to move programming online right now. So this does a pretty good job, I would have to admit, especially compared to some other blockchain networks that I've seen on the web that are really just not very well documented. I don't want to mention any names here. So here I'm doing the formal Node.js install, and I'm going to verify that as it comes back. And again, the installs are a little bit more expansive to include that with every video. That's why I cut out to bring up the clients and things like that. But still, I think it's valuable because these break over time. Everything breaks over time. So in this case, I think it is helpful to, at least for those of you who are accessing these resources within a relatively short period of time of their creation, that it's going to work out of the box. So here I validated node 20, and now I can use npm and I can start to install the related Aptos libraries. The nice thing about Aptos, right, and using this network is I do not have to test locally. I'm testing on the DevNet. And for that reason, I don't need a lot of resources. I'm using the T2 instance, as I've done in the earlier videos, and that's a big plus, working with Move and the Aptos framework, especially compared to, let's say, Ethereum, where I'm going to be running perhaps a C5 instance that I've done in those videos, which is definitely a much more expensive resource. And not mentioning taking it to the test networks, that I have to go through a lot more effort to get the appropriate resources to put on the test net. And obviously a lot more resources to be on a production mainnet. So here I did an npm install of the npm package. Now I'm going to install Python, the pip3. So we're using pip3 to install the Aptos CLI. And that seems to work appropriately now. We have Python 3 with our default Ubuntu, but we don't have the latest pip3 installer. So that is going to pull it down and install it appropriately. But you'll see when I do the install with the command line CLI, I run it through Python 3, and that's already included. So I'll just do that right out of the box. Here I'm going to restart a system utility, and I'm just defaulting any of these installs as usual. My common method of operation default, if at all possible, and go from there. So I don't have to worry about some type of custom install. So here I'm installing the Aptos SDK, and I'm going to do a clone of Aptos core. And I back up these environments to my GitHub as well, but it's not your best interest to clone it down because it's not really pulling up the entire environment as it is installed. So you're going to have to go through this if you haven't already. Again, if you've ran through some of the earlier videos, you can just take it verbatim and run through bypassing this step. But we're almost done. It's almost installed, so it's not too much of a effort to include this every video. For that reason, I'm still including those. So I'm going to wait for this. It's going to be about 2 more seconds. Okay, I think we're almost done. And now I'm going to install Aptos CLI, and then I can start to run the Aptos command line steps here. So here we are, we're up and running with Aptos. I'm going to do an init, and I'm going to fully qualify my path. Again, this is more of a sandbox. In most cases, you're going to want to set up an environment variable to be able to accomplish this. But I know Aptos is at the home Ubuntu-local bin, so I'm going to just include that. And I'm going to default this, so I want to run on the dev.net network, and I'm going to generate a separate private key. Now, I'm going to verify everything on the DevNet Explorer with Aptos. So I'm going to grab my account, and I can look up my account and validate my transaction. So I'm just going to pull this off and include this off on the side, off screen, and we're going to prep some commands as we move forward, because we can't use the default account addresses because we're going to get our own unique address, right, to run this. So here I have an account that's set up, as you see back here, and it gave me a success, so we can move forward. Now I'm going to fund that account and use the command fund with faucet. You notice here with account, I just set it to default. If you're going to be reinitializing accounts, you may not be able to, it may break if you're just going to default. You're going to have to specifically include that account name after an account if you run this command, as well as an atomo file. You're going to have to include your specific account number so it doesn't get confused if you have, again, if you start running multiple accounts or taking this resource and tutorial and start expanding on it and building your own project. So here we're able to add the appropriate resources, and now I can CD to the appropriate directory where they have included these initial Hello World style programs to get us up and running with move programming. So I CD to the Aptos core down to move examples and the Hello blockchain example here. So I have the move TOML file. This is your configuration file. I'm going to use verbatim, and then under the sources is the actual move module code. Let's get up and running, and then I'm going to go to the module and we'll step through it line by line and give a basic description of exactly what we're able to accomplish. First off, let's do a compile on that module. And the module is just doing some simple operations, doing a basic hello world. We're going to be setting a string that resides in a structure and reading from that resource off the blockchain, as well as observing the events and also running some assertion tests against that. And interestingly, with move programming, I can include my assertion tests right in the module. It's super convenient, and I can have that very close between the two. So I view that as a strong advantage. Here I did a move compile, and we got a positive result here. So, and message is the name of my module. Again, we're going to break it down as soon as we get this up and running and prove it out. So the next thing I'm going to do is run the assertion test on that. Interestingly, I can run the assertion test without publishing it to the blockchain. I can just run it pretty much inline and get the result here. So here we have actually two move files here with assertion tests in them, and it's going to be running everything out of that default directory. If I see here, I have a message test and message. So I have a message test, and so that produces 2 unit tests. They both passed. And again, as usual, basically these tests are just verifying that I was able to set up the resources and I was able to pass in a value to the string. Again, we'll break it down in a second here. Okay, so let's just move forward here. So we're running really close to the video, exactly what they have described here. So next step, and again, just following very close to Aptos doc, I'm going to be doing a publish to, in this case, DevNet blockchain. And this is really a great advantage, right? Because I don't have to do a local simulation. You can bring up your own local node. You can do a local simulation, but here the DevNet is so convenient. There's no purpose for that. And it's bringing us anything that brings us closer to production network. I always view it as a positive. There's no purpose in doing a lot of localized testing. If I can go to a DevNet, it's just going to, again, nothing is perfect between a local install and a production. So if I can get closer to that, I view that as a strong positive. So here I allocated the gas and ran that, and it came back appropriately. I have a transaction hash. Again, I'm going to copy that, and I'm saving that across, and we're going to look that up on the total proof here. When I look up on the DevNet Explorer, I absolutely, without a doubt, know that it executed appropriately, right? So I did the publish, and so now let's run it. We can run our first module here. And again, it's doing some basic operations, so it can go without a little bit of explanation, at least for the moment, and then we're going to dig into the code here. So here I have, I'm running Aptos again and doing a move, and now I'm going to run it off the DevNet blockchain, and I'm running the default. So I have address. See, we separated the double colons here under the function ID. I have a default. This is my default address. So I have address, move module, function. So I'm going through the default, which is that address that I picked up, the 0x569. And then I have the message identifying the module, and I'm running set message. I'm going to pass in a string. I'm just saying hello blockchain. So let's run that, and it's going to prompt me for the gas. I'm going to approve it, and that comes back appropriately as well with a positive. So I'm save that off again, and I have another transaction, and again I can look those up and validate that appropriately. So let me move forward here. So now I can do a curl type command, or I can put this directly in the browser, which is what I'm going to do. And I have, again, the addresses included here. The first one was the account. So I'm going to pull that in here, and we're going to validate that resource. Okay, we wrote to the blockchain, so let's read it from the blockchain. And we can do a number of different ways. Here, we're going to do it very efficiently through the browser and build a REST style command as described in the Aptos documentation. So I'm looking under accounts, and this is an old command, and I'm staging it. I have to restage it with our updated address. So you see we're identifying message holder is a struct, message is the module name, and then I have the address, okay, of where it's located. So in this case, it is leveraging the account address. And I have to be careful here that I am using the 0x in the module reference, but I don't use it, as you see in the example below, I don't use it in the prior account address. So I can copy this in, and up here, I'll just bring in a new tab here, and you can see it return hello blockchain. So I wrote to a struct in the blockchain. I was able to read that out and validate it from the blockchain from a REST style command. I could use a curl utility to the command line here. I just very conveniently put it in the browser. And I want to point out a few things here, and I've documented both runs. I ran this earlier a couple weeks ago, and what happened is they described next using a message change events is going to allow for me to read a from and to event if I do subsequent runs of this move module. Okay, if you notice here, there isn't a message change events that is being generated in the JSON style format as output. So this changed, okay, and I've used almost exactly to my documentation the exact same running. So for whatever reason, there's some kind of change in Aptos core. This isn't running as advertised as it once did. I've documented earlier runs, which it did. Currently, in this video, it's not running. However, I have a new means, or a different means rather, of verifying the events, and I'm going to stage that right now, and we're going to check that event. So we do know that the hello blockchain executed. Let's just do another run here, and I can duplicate the run. I'm going to do another set message and reset that struct. In this case, I'm going to just say hello blockchain again, okay? And run that, and it's going to prompt me. And I can go back here and update this. And as you see it updated here. So now I can look at the actual event by referencing it REST style in using this command. Now I could do similar operations through the DevNet Explorer, but just giving you a different way that you can access it. And we'll look at the DevNet Explorer in a second here before we jump down and look at the code. So Here, let me stage that command. And I'm going to see, I'm looking for transaction hash here. And let me grab the transaction, the most current transaction hash, and pull that off here and stage this. And we're going to update that and explain, put in a little explanation here as we go along. So you note here in this REST style command, I'm looking up the DevNet Explorer, TXN, the transaction under events, and I'm looking at the DevNet as mentioned. So let me just stack in our new command. You could automate this. You could build it REST-alic and use curl. I can go through the DevNet Explorer. I could do half a dozen different ways of setting this up. So here we just want to validate those events. And again, this is in lieu of the message change events, which is really doesn't have anything to read, okay? Because if it did have something to read, not that it isn't working, but the first command with the run, so you notice if you match this to the developer's documentation, they have a message change events that's being established, and it did establish at one point. I am not sure exactly what's going on here. What I think is that it is technically maybe there's some type of change, and if I find out in the Aptos core if there is something that is being updated, then I will document that and go back and backfill this appropriately. But here we can validate this. This actually brings up the DevNet Explorer, so this eliminates a lot of fumbling through DevNet Explorer, and we can look up from the event end of it. And with that new transaction ID, if you notice here, I had hello blockchain and then hello blockchain again. So I was able to validate this directly from their Explorer. And I can do similar operations with the account and then pull that up and observe the transactions as I did with the first coin and the NFT transactions and validate that from the Aptos DevNet Explorer. One thing to keep in mind is make sure that you're going to DevNet and also validate if you're looking up transactions, you're going to have to look for either accounts or transactions, input that. But here I was able to validate it from the event side and read that resource. So we have two means that we were able to access that. So let's take a look at the source code and break that down a little bit since we got everything up and running, right? So here I'm going to CD sources. And we have two files here. There's a blockchain test move there. They both executed when I did the assertion testing. But you look in the hello blockchain test, it's just more of a minimalized version where they access the account information and do a validation on the set. But once you look at hello blockchain, I think that everything is going to make a lot of sense here. So we don't necessarily have to look at both, but they did include both of these for to have a little more expansive means of testing here. So here, so starting from the top, okay, we have a module and move programming. And you can have an address here. Here they've identified as hello blockchain, but technically what we have is an address and module name. So you remember this was called message. That was the actual module name, and it's separated by the double colon. I have some libraries brought in here and the Aptos event framework. Two structs are defined here, and we have key. This allows for a unique key access to struct. A struct is very similar to just about any popular programming language. It's going to give you bare bones implementation, just short of an object, of where you can have multiple data types identified here. The message change has identified as a drop. It's going to give you more expansive functionality as far as related to memory management using a destructor memory, and then and also store is going to give a little more advanced means of global storage. Okay, and I've included some documentation. We'll break this stuff down a little bit further if I generate more content that's related to move programming. In this struct here, I have the address that's being stored and the from and to, and we saw that implemented directly on the Aptos blockchain. So here I have a get message function, and Now, the interesting between set and get, set has an entry function, and we're able to invoke that from the command line. Entry is necessary to be able to call that as we did. Now, get message is only invoked locally within the module, so I can only have other functions invoke that. I can't call that directly unless I set that as a entry-level function. Here we have an assert, and it is making sure that there is memory of type message holder referenced at the specific address. And in usual method with the means of having the last line of code return the value, borrow global is going to return an address, in this case, to the message holder type definition of that specific address, and here taking the specific memory value, right? Now I have set message, and this takes in, as the first get message, just pulled in the address, and the second is going to pull in the account and the actual message that we sent in as the parameter. So if you notice, we only set one function parameter when we did set message, and the account is set as really a default parameter in the context of move. So here we grab the account address, we check if it exists, and the exists is looking of type of that particular structure located at that specific address, or following through with syntax very close to Rust. So if you're familiar with that environment, then a lot of the syntax and style of programming is very similar to that. So move to is going to take the message identified as such and move it to that specific account address. And in the case that it already exists, with that second time through, it's going to be running through here, and it's going to grab the message holder and put that in an old message holder, and then we're going to take the associated message, and we're going to, as we identified in the DevNet Explorer, right, that we have emitted an event of the from and to message and put in the message according to the earlier message holder. So now we have the assertion testing here with the fun sender can set message. And this takes the address of the account and it creates an account, because if you notice, we did this before even publishing it. So we didn't use it formally on the blockchain. And we tested out doing the set message, and the assertion is testing that actually did what it was advertised, right? And otherwise sending out an error message. So there you have it. We were able to set up our Aptos environment. We've done that before, but here we did a compile, publish, testing the assertion test, execution, and validation, not only from our REST style implementation, but also through Aptos Explorer. They were able to validate the output. As usual, all the documentation is on the related GitHub that'll be below this video. Hope this helps. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe, and take care. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye.